by the time we get to some of the highlight reports, given the nature of the discussions we've had, actually a number of those things will have been covered. That's my optimisticness somewhere in the numbers there. So I think that we're moving now to item 9, which is our first sort of highlight report. If you like, that's a report from Karen.
Yeah.
In terms of Chair of the People Academy, if you'd like to kick off.
I will be very quick and just pull out highlights and lowlights. So we go back to September and cover September and October. I'll focus on the main points out of each. So we did raise the high level risk around lone worker devices, particularly for our community midwives. I know that was touched upon this morning. At the point when this was raised, we were waiting for a contract for new lone worker devices. We now have them. And we did share that at October's Academy, and Sugra talked about some teething problems that we had. So I don't think we're where we need to be on them, albeit we do have those devices now. So we've just got to work through those issues. As always, at People Academy, we had a really robust session around nurse staffing in September and October. I'll give you September's numbers just as an indication because I haven't got October's yet, but improvements have been made to the onboarding process. There's been a big focus all year. We have 40 international staff who were waiting to join by the end of September and have now joined. And we did celebrate the work that the education and the CSU teams have done to get those people through and make it happen. We celebrated as well a reduction in nurse turnover, registered nurse turnover. It's now sitting at 10.2% from 13.5% over the last 6 months. And it's actually one of the lowest rates in the region, albeit there are still vacancies outstanding at Band 5 and in healthcare support work as well. We talked about those vacancies in October as well, and the team have moved to boot camps rather than 6 monthly open days. So they're working as well in terms of creating as a pipeline, which is great news. And we did in September take some time out to celebrate the amazing achievements of Kat, Shutt and the OD team who brought home the Team of the Year award from the HPMA Awards. I know it's in Mel's report as well, but actually a really well-deserved award for a fantastic team who do go above and beyond for the well-being and development of the Trust people day to day. We touched on in October industrial action. So in September, we were anticipating industrial action crossing with the Conservative Party conference. In October, a different story and positive news because the unions and government have got around the table and hopefully we may see an end to those strikes, especially good news as we approach winter. We did raise a new risk around the Trust reputation. So damaged and trust between the board and the Trust people is impacted as a result of the recent media attention. And we obviously need to have a look at that damage. But also, despite strong improvements that we've made in the recruitment process and efforts to retain really great people, potential candidates could also be off-put by that as well. So a risk that we will continue to focus on. We had a really good update on freedom to speak up. We got 25 concerns in the last quarter, highest yet, which is good from a speak up perspective. But we did talk about all the channels available. So that's not 25 people speaking up, it's using the freedom to speak up route. But there are lots of other channels where those speak up routes are used as well. The majority of those comes from nursing and midwifery, around 28%, and the national trend is aligned similarly, so 29% of that workforce profile as well. A mix of concerns, patient safety or quality, inappropriate attitudes and behaviours, worker safety and wellbeing, but all of those cases have been followed up on, with the exception of 3 anonymous, and that anonymity is coming down. So whilst voices are heard, people are choosing to raise them in a named way rather than anonymous, which is also good. There were 3 areas out of those freedom to speak up complaints around bullying and harassment, inappropriate behaviour and attitude, and civility, and the HR and OD teams. We're going to do a piece of work around that. And our union staff side rep who does attend the People Academy, asked us to make sure that those involved in Day 6 investigations were followed up with those individuals as well, which the team committed to do. And a further update on strategic nursing and midwifery as well. And this time we focused around what happens on the ward. So the ward having a say in terms of numbers and safety, and the ward manager and ward staff looking at data and sharing those recommendations with the matron, how that then feeds up to ETM, People Academy, and then the board. And Raquel Leakus, who is one of our staff governors, raised a really good point about, could we please make sure we got feedback back to the wards about the decisions that were made at ETM, which again the team committed to do. And during October we had 66 local newly qualified staff join the trust, another 14 special nurses that were recruited, and we talked about the boot camps and some awards as well. And we recognised 2 healthcare support workers that have been awarded the Chief Nurse of England award, which was great news. We touched on culture, as we always do, and the Culture and Leadership Programme, which you may recognise as Thriving Together, because we wanted to tag it under the whole Thrive programme at the Trust. And this really is about, as Fahim described earlier, really understanding the impact of culture across the whole of the organisation, the legacy, the generational differences, and how people feel and think, with a long-term programme view that could address the challenge to get into those deeper elements of culture that are more difficult to change. Fahim did mention the 30 people that have come from across the organisation to join a change team belonging to a steering group that Mel will chair, and there'll be a Thriving Together network that will create ambassadors to spread the word across the trust as well. So a really good piece of work there. Subra shared a really vital people and patient story about a deceased Muslim patient. The trust and the local community went above and beyond to make sure that that individual got the rituals and the passing to the resting place as good as we could get it. And we got some great feedback from the family. Within the academy, we recognise the work, particularly of the mortuary and Richard Nixon, who's only been in the trust actually for 8 weeks, and did comment at the academy that he believed the process captured the values and how the trust values diversity. So it's great to hear from a newcomer on that as well. And as ever, at the academy, we went through the dashboard. So not only is turnovers dropping very well and lower now than anticipated, absence is also falling and stands at 5.6% against the target that the trust set itself of 5.5% by the end of March. So a significant drop. Lots of work ongoing across the trust to drive those numbers down. And we do talk about how the meetings were probably a bit too optimistic on the agenda, as ever, crammed too much in. We deferred a couple of items to November, but actually there was a good level of challenge, and that contributed to making the meeting tight, but actually was fantastic from a much wider audience perspective. So we've done an effectiveness review at the academy, and we're starting to see the results of that come through in activity meetings as well. I'll leave it there and answer any questions.
I think you need to give yourself a good talking to Karen if you let your meeting run over.
Actually, it was 3 minutes.
So, well, that's practically on the dot.
High standards.
Oh dear, pot's calling the kettle here. But, okay, that's very good, and really good metrics there in terms of some of those improvements, you know, that are good from a people point of view. Is there anything you wanted to add, Ian, in terms of from your perspective?
No, nothing in particular. And I think the only thing I would say is that we have done an effectiveness of the academy, and I think we had a much better participation in this than what we've seen before. So hopefully that'll continue. Normally, you know, sometimes you do get the same voices, but actually it's quite an engaged meeting. So very positive.
Thank you. Any questions for Karen? Well, just one little one from me then, in terms of when you're identifying risks and concerns, do you close the loop on that and identify mitigating actions as well?
Yes, we do, and we do report the mitigation, so the academy is fully cited on it as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no further questions, a comprehensive report, and some, it also correlates with some of the discussions we had with the council of governors, doesn't it?
It does.
In terms of doing things like datings, follow-ups and the like. Okay, so the next item, there isn't one, because there hasn't been a meeting of the Equality and Diversity Council since the last meeting. So we can go straight to number 11, which is the nursing and midwifery staffing review, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Helen. The PowerPoint presentation, which I think is Appendix 1, call it the Easy Read Guide. I'm not going to stand up and present it, but the highlights are within there. As Karen Walker has already said, this has been discussed at a number of forums, including the People Academy. And this is the sort of nationally mandated 6-monthly staffing review, which looks at both nursing and midwifery staffing levels, both registered and non-registered. The methodology, we've probably had the same methodology now for about 4 or 5 years, and we do review if we could do it even better every time, but actually it works, because what we do is we look at a lot of data, we triangulate from a lot of sources, so including we look at the rosters, we look at the actual budget statements, we look at the professional judgments of the people involved, we look at incidents, we look at falls data, harms data, and we also do it from the ward up. So we talk to the staff on the wards and we ask them, does this feel like you've got the right staffing levels on? Now, you have to remember though, this is, if we were 100% staffed and our sickness absence level was 3%, and nobody was on maternity leave, and we have these staff in post, that would be the actual right level of staffing to have. So this is based on establishment, not staff on post, staffing post. So the key points really, we've previously seen in this report a number of things where we've said subject to business case, subject to business case. There's never a slide in here that says these became a business case and it came to fruition and those business cases have been funded through the correct route. It can be very clear to differentiate between the strategic staffing review that looks at acuity and changes toward activity versus any service developments. So the only areas, so every single nursing area has been reviewed. The only ones presented within the presentation are the ones where there's either been, there is an increase in establishment requested, a decrease in establishment requested, because I do that every now and again as well, Matthew, and where we've said for a reason that we are not going to look at to consider a request. So the example there is one of the wards has asked for additional staff because of a day case procedure that they're undertaking. And we've said, no, we need to look at where that activity takes place. That's a creeping development. Maternity is in there. The points note on maternity is around birthday plus. So we know from all the activity that's happening in maternity, the MIS standards and the amount of training that is required, the percentage that is plugged into Birth Rate Plus, which is the sausage machine that comes out with the number of midwives you need at the end of it, does not represent the amount of training that is expected. We are planning to run Birth Rate Plus again over the next couple of months, and we're going to do it in 2 ways. So we're going to do it at the 22% that we've always done it at, plus the 24 point, I think it's 24.5 or 24.2%, which is more reflective of how much time is spent by staff in doing that training. Where are we going next? And I think that is it. So I will come back to the recommendations. So there is a request of board, and to note the paper, which includes the recommendations for changes to establishments to, I think it's 3 wards. 1 turned down, to note the maternity paper and to support the increase in the nursing budgets for just over £200,000.
Okay, thank you. So I was trying to map that across to what it says in your recommendations in here.
It's all right, the screen had gone blank,
It's all right.
Ellen. So it was
Okay.
just over £200, and then there's a negative to come off that. So it's actually an increase of £150,000.
I'm not sure it says any of that in your recommendations in here, but don't worry about it, it doesn't matter. We'll stick with the ones that are in the paper. I've had the same problem with my little screen here as well in terms of catching a battle inch. I think this is also an area, so as a newbie, you will have gone through the journey of say the staffing reports, you will recognise this, you will know what you've heard and you will be able to relate it back to when you've had previous reports. So there's, from my perspective, it's very difficult, I think, looking at a staffing report and nursing midwifery staffing report by annual to a report and thinking, yeah, because it's just cold to me because I haven't been on your journey with you. So I'm going to be quite reliant now, I think, particularly on those of you who have been doing that in terms of any questions or any points of clarification that you've got for Karen before we move to the recommendations.
Karen, come in.
Yeah.
Just to reflect that this before this comes to board, Karen gets really put through her paces on this on a regular basis by colleagues in the ETM meeting, and what we're able to do is really understand in that conversation the operational changes that bring about the additional asks or the reduced asks.
Yeah.
So if there has been a change in the cohort of patients on a particular ward, if we're closing a ward, opening one, expanding one, moving things around, we've got all that context in order to make have those challenges at the ETM before it comes here, and to give Matthew the opportunity to lie down in a dark room often. Because as Karen says, there is sometimes an increase and less frequently perhaps a decrease in the expectation. But that's the nature of the kind of patients and the demands that patients are placing on us currently.
Okay, and you would that's where you'd expect those crunchy operational quality and arguments to take place. Mohammed?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Karen. Karen, just in the appendix, the maternity services red flag, looking at the bar charts there, it shows that the biggest bar chart or the skyscrapers in there are kind of delays in transfer to labour ward.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk to what the root causes of the issues behind that transfer, delays in transfer, and how the establishment request would seek to address those.
So I don't think the establishment request would address those. Oh, sorry. The issue in delays of transfer to labour ward is around labour ward capacity. So if labour ward is full, if we're waiting for women to move on, or indeed if we've not got the correct number of midwives on the labour ward, would be why there might be a delay in getting to labour ward. We encourage the staff in maternity to flag these incidents. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's been a harm occurred or an adverse impact on that woman, because separately we also report on things like a delay in epidural. So if a woman's delayed in getting to labour ward, it might then also result in the baby being born off the labour ward, which we report happens infrequently, but not never. A delay in getting an epidural, because we only do epidurals on the labour ward. So that's sort of the knock-on effect of that. So it's usually about the number of women labouring in that given time on that labour ward.
That's helpful, thank you. But I couldn't quite work out what the connection between those two things was. And I think perhaps just in terms of feedback, in the papers, when there's such an obvious kind of outlier in terms of a block compared to the others, it just may be helpful to have just a bit of narrative to explain that. But for those of us who are not clinicians or experts in the same way, trying to understand what it is, I was trying to draw a connection between one and the other, and I was struggling a little bit. But that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie?
But I get the kind of process we go through, say staffing, and make sure we've got new staff on our wards. I didn't know this were a question until I just listened to that bit. How do we know we've got the right number of beds? So from a capacity point of view, so we know we've got the right number, we go through a process, we've got the right number of staffing. How do we know the level of beds we've got is right? Do we ever do an exercise on that?
Huge exercises, at least 28 times a year, and I'll come to Saj at this point. It's David.
Sorry, that was slipped my mind when we were talking about it.
Absolutely, no, Julie, thank you for that. This is part and parcel of our winter planning. And so what we can do, we have done, is we look back historically in terms of the demand we get, because month on month, depending on whether we're in summer or winter, you have a different level of demand. So we look at the profile of demand, we look at whether that's been increasing or decreasing, and then we put forward a bed plan. What we also do is go down to the detail of whether the beds are in the right place. So for instance, the medical beds versus the surgical beds. And in fact, one of the discussions, and I know it's in your report, was around stroke beds, for instance. We know our SNAP score was impacted because we weren't able to maintain the patients on the stroke ward for 90% or 80% of their time whilst in hospital. So what you'll see is that we're opening a stroke rehab ward to improve that pathway. So we look at that and we manage that on a year by year basis and through the winter plan as well.
And there are examples on my report, so I should have made that link, but did we do it routinely?
Yeah. It's a good question because many organisations struggle to get that into place. So you're right.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Sandra?
I asked Karen earlier about something that was in the red flags report, just around delays in medical review, something that's come up on some of the incidents that we've looked at in the past. And this is very much, you said it was more to do with staffing rather than a training issue and people recognising the signs of deterioration. There was an article in the local press this week about an instance, and obviously we can't comment on the specifics of a particular case, but that family reported that there were issues around staffing and availability of beds in the maternity, which resulted in the patient going home and having the baby at home. What's the safety net around people being asked to go home because presumably it's a clinical safety judgment about whether they should go home or whether we ask them to wait somewhere else in the department. What does that look like?
So the safety net, so at the moment, and we're still, it's ongoing actually, and Sarah alluded to it. So there are delays in bringing women in for induction of labour. For many reasons, the number of women delivering, changes to guidance. So we used to induce women at 40+10 and now we do it at 40+7. So, and some women get induced sooner with certain conditions and we're better at picking up those conditions. Excuse me. This is having an impact across our system. But what we do is we bring in a number of safeguards. So if somebody was meant to come in on Monday to be induced for whatever reason that may be, we would do a welfare check, we would do a CTG, we would say to them, if you go home, that's fine, but if you're concerned that you've got any pain, your baby's not moving, so we safety net them. And then we will bring them, say to them, would you like to come in for a welfare check the next day? If we're going to get them in for induction of labour then. And if anything changed that meant that the mum or the baby was in danger and we could recognise that, then of course we wouldn't just send somebody home, we would induce that labour or go to an emergency section. So that's our normal practice with that. I think our staff sometimes also say, oh, labour ward's full, so we can't bring you in for your induction, or oh, we're short staffed today, we can't bring you in for your induction. People sometimes say clumsy things. What I would say is that it's been extremely busy. The labour ward has been full, and over this period we've been staffing up as best we can in those areas, including an agreement to make additional payments for midwives working in those areas at this time. I don't want to go into any more details about that individual case because I don't think that will be fair in this report. But happy to discuss that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the update. So we've got 4 recommendations that are presumably generic in terms of just under, our confidence, I guess, in the process that's gone through, and particularly the way you do things through ATM. And then there's one around an exclusions around winter preparedness and funding, and also about where there's a change in service delivery, the staff implications are presented as part of the business case to the clinical service unit, which I'm now glad I know what the CSU is, because in my world it's something completely different. So they're the 4 sort of generic recommendations, and then there are 4 that are specific to maternity in the paper. So can I just invite you to just support those recommendations? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Now, we're going to go to items 16 and 17 now because Judith is outside. So she knows she's coming in. We're going to take those out of order to save her having to wait. And are you sitting at this end or that end? Are you sit there? That's absolutely fine. Hi, Judith, again. I saw you yesterday. I've seen you twice in children's. I'm excited. Been there, could remember your name a moment ago, and now remember your face. I know, yeah. So we're going to take both of your items now, items 16 and 17, so we don't keep you waiting and then you can get off. When you're ready.
Thank you. I'll do the improvement strategy
Yeah.
first, if you don't mind, and then it might give us a little bit more time to do PISA, PISA and the policy. So the improvement strategy is a culmination of the collaboration and work over the last 12 months with a number of stakeholders and teams whose work touches, enables and facilitates improvement work. Teams such as the transformation team led by Chris Danson, our OD team led by Kat Shutt, and our GERF lead, Dr. Kavika Nadasalinen, as well as the quality team. We've taken time to really think about our approach to quality improvement, building on our model which we developed nearly 3 years ago. We've made sure it's reflective of current national thinking, being mindful of the NHS long-term plan, the National Patient Safety Strategy, the Quality Board's shared view of quality, and the more recent Eden review, which was published in April of this year. And that's been more further developed with the NHS's impact approach to improvement being published. The latter has certainly cemented our thinking and reinforced the key characteristics and facilitators of effective and system-wide improvement, and has affirmed that we are on the right track in how we view quality and improvement. When pulling the strategy together, the challenge was to define what we actually meant by quality, and there was a lot of literature to pull from: the National Quality Board, the Health Foundation, NHS England, etc., etc. We've already started thinking about what quality means to us, and as we've developed the terms of reference for the Quality and Patient Safety Academy, this is one of the core elements of function of that academy. And this is aligned to the national published documents, specifically the National Quality Board shared vision for ICSs, and the CQC have also adopted this model as part of their new single assessment framework. So this means that we approach quality from a perspective of safe, effective, positive patient experience, well-led, that we're using our resources sustainably, and that is equitable. The strategy sets out 5 ambitions: to build a shared purpose and vision, to invest in developing our culture and people, to develop leadership behaviours that support improvement, build improvement capability, and to embed trust quality management systems. We also must acknowledge the work that we've done to support improvement using our outstanding approach, and we will continue to build on this as our improvement work becomes more embedded. The next steps will be to bring our teams together and work through what our trust priorities are and how we will deploy the most appropriate resources to improvement work going forward. And the appointment of our new exec director for transformation and strategy will be pivotal to making the strategy a reality and developing our operational model.
Okay, thank you very much. So, really, really good read. I think that improvement strategy. So thank you for doing that. I'll open it up for questions, assuming the QPSA have had a go through this.
So not really so much questions, but really an acknowledgement of the work that Judith, the team, especially with Liz Tomlin, have put into this. I think, as you say, Helen, it is a readable document, which is difficult sometimes for strategies to be. But I think for me, this sets out clearly what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Again, I think the danger sometimes the strategies are a little bit aspirational and not clear in thinking. I think this isn't that. I think it is very clear in its approach and its thinking. And I really commend Judith and the team for the work done on this. Yeah, very well.
Yeah, so it's spot on. So Paul and then Julie.
I was just going to build on that appreciation from Ray. Judith's been incredibly patient with my bit of the organisation, transformation director in NHS, and has obviously reshaped itself to ensure that the CIO, CP, all those roles are also seen as intrinsic to transformation, and we've got an opportunity to make some updates, contributions, and I think the team has been incredibly flexible in that regard, and I think it's a better read as a consequence and shows and tells a more unified story. But yeah, I just want to appreciate you patience as much as anything.
I said it to Judith last night. Well done. I think we do some great work in this area. It's a good document, and I like the language in it.
Sorry, I was just going to make the link between this and psychological safety, actually, and back to freedom to speak up. So making sure that people understand it's about continuous learning and improvement, not about blame, and therefore more willing to speak up and say we've had this incident, and therefore what can we learn from it, rather than we've had this incident, who's responsible. So there's an OD piece for me in here with, you know, I'm sure you linked to Kat and the team in terms of that, but just stressing the importance of safety.
And that
For
links
people to
very
be able
nicely to the next item.
Okay, so just a couple of points. I'm picking up on that point, Karen. So how do we do that? How do we get this out into the organisation so it's a bit more strongly as part of the culture of how we do things around here?
Well, we're already doing that. So there's a lot of the leadership work that Kat's team are doing. The NHS impact assessment that we will do on behalf of the organisation will help us to identify our blind spots or our weaker areas. And I think that piece of work, along with a session that we're going to be doing with our clinical service units in January after Christmas, will help us really to bring improvement to alive at that level as we're consulting with them, the triumvirates and the staff that actually make a difference and do the work on the ground.
Okay, well, my second question was about improvement methodology. So having been to a couple of national events now where they're shouting around NHS impact, and a lot of talk about using a tried and tested methodology, Virginia Mason nearly always being the one that gets presented out and case studied, and that tension between a sort of doing your own thing, but nevertheless being able to stand up confidently that the improvement methodology within an organisation is robust because it hasn't got some sort of benchmarking thing, time marking thing. So I just wonder whether you'd had that debate in here and where you were with that.
We have. So we have adopted the Institute for Health Improvements model for improvement alongside developing our outstanding programmes using the same methodology. So that is the methodology that we use here at Bradford.
Thank you. So do you want to add something there? Are we just stretching?
No. I was going to add something to the previous point you raised, Helen, and that was around the Judith kind of answer around the engagement with the CSUs. I think we want an approach which is not doing the quality, is doing improvement to our colleagues. It's supporting them to do it for themselves, but making it part of business as usual. And I think the engagement that Judith and her team have within the CSUs is better than it's ever been in this organisation. There's still more work to do there, but I think that's absolutely the key. Not for a quality team to do it all, but everybody in the organisation to do it, supported and guided by the experts involved.
I guess building on some of our earlier conversation about our improvements award, and actually that spirit of improvement, I think needs to be a strong feature of our board development programme, which we sort of committed to progressing with earlier on today. So, okay, well, that's it. The questions on that. Do you want to move on to PISA? Yeah. So, I'm supposed to probably make sure we've got to approve it properly. Jumping over me a little to-do list. So we do approve the improvement strategy. I think everybody's content to do that. And I think we will look forward to seeing how that sort of gets, I guess, as part of the sort of OD and support work. I think we'll keep an eye on that as a board, I guess, going forward and make sure that it is being sort of viewed in that way. Okay, thank you.
So the patient safety incident response policy and patient safety incident response plan. So board members will be aware that we have been preparing to transition to the new National Patient Safety Incident Response Framework, to roll off the tongue, does it, for around 18 months now. Contractually, we are obliged to transition this autumn, and in order for us to do that, we need to have a new policy which outlines how we will investigate and review patient safety incidents under the new framework. And this has been underpinned by our Patient Safety Incident Response Plan, which we have developed and consulted with a number of stakeholders, including Bradford District Care Trust, Bradford and Craven Healthcare Partnership, the Integrated Care Board and other partners. PSERV makes the board, directors and provider organisations accountable for the high quality incident responses, whilst integrated care boards will consider the provider's overall approach to learning and improvement rather than individual responses or investigations as we've had in the past. Just as a reminder to colleagues that PSERV is a core element of the National Patient Safety Strategy, which sets out the NHS's approach to developing and maintaining effective systems and processes responding to patient safety incidents for the purpose of learning and improving safety and care. Unlike the current serious incident framework, the PSERV has moved away from prescriptive criteria that meets the harm threshold to establish whether an investigation is required. PSERV builds on what we've already learned from other safety critical industries and builds on the science that we know that safety and the elements of safety is required. This means we have to think about systems, human factors, ergonomics, how we interact with the ever-increasing use of technology, as well as the emergence of artificial intelligence and virtual services. The policy in the plan demonstrates our ambition to be a learning organisation, using our resources effectively, using different methods to review or investigate patient safety incidents at the front line, empowering our staff, patients and families to be collaborative partners in this process. There are 4 key aims of PSERV: compassionate engagement and involvement of those affected by patient safety incidents, the application of a range of system-based approaches to learning from patient safety incidents, and a considered and proportionate response to patient safety incidents and safety issues. Supportive oversight focused on strengthening the response system functioning and improvement. We have reviewed 3 years of incidents as well as pulling data or insight as it's described in the National Patient Safety Strategy from other sources such as patient experience, clinical negligence claims, coroner's inquests, to understand our local patient safety incident profile. We enlisted the help of a researcher to help us not only look at our data from a quantitative perspective, but also from a qualitative perspective. We've also looked at our current improvement work to identify areas that will benefit from learning responses to maximise opportunities for improvement. The purpose of the Patient Safety Incident Response Plan is to describe how we've developed our patient safety profile, to describe how we will respond to patient safety incidents for the purpose of learning and informing improvement, and it sets out how the Trust will respond to patient safety incidents, how they will be reviewed and updated on an annual basis with a full review at year 4. The annual review will incorporate any new learning, any changes to the organisational risk profile, and include a review of linked improvement initiatives. At year 4, we will conduct a full review of progress, and we anticipate that PSERV will become embedded as part of the Trust's wider processes and systems to demonstrate learning improvement and assurance. The plan covers responses to patient safety incidents for the purpose of system learning and improvement, and it does not cover responses needed for other aspects such as professional conduct or competence, establishing liability or availability, cause of death, coroner's inquests or criminal investigations. Table 1 shows and sets out what our local priorities will be in the first year. These are people and adults and children admitted with a medical or surgical need, but also having an underlying mental health crisis, and the safe internal hospital movement of patients. We have got a caveat in there for anything that's emerging, such as an emergency issue, such as we had where our electricity went out in the A&E department last year.
Table 2 shows our patient safety and improvement responses, and Table 3 depicts the ongoing national requirements, such as patients with mental health issues who have died whilst in care, or leader or criminal responses that's required. The policy outlines how we will investigate, what tools and methodologies we will use to learn, and our patient safety incident response plan serves as a roadmap guiding our teams to respond effectively and efficiently to anyone facing circumstances or adverse events that may arise. This, in essence, means that we will do less formal investigations as we have done in the past, but we will do them better, and where learnings are identified early, we will be able to put the actions in place, both involving our staff and patients.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're invited to approve a policy and the response plan, as well as the transition date on the 1st of December. And I'm working on the assumption that our QPSA again have had a good go through there. So I'll come to Ray and then to Karen.
So I could say ditto what I said before, really. Again, a lot of work to be done on this, and you know, this coming right on hot on the heels of the quality accounts and the improvement strategy. It shows the amount of work that Judy and the team are doing. The name I'd add to this to say thank you to the others I said before, Will Wilkinson, who's had a big input for this. I think PSERF is a real opportunity for us. I think those of us who were able to get to the first training session 3 weeks or so ago now, I think saw the possibilities of it and the opportunity that we can have there. Judith has touched on it. I think this gives us a chance to actually invest our resources, and one of the principles of PSERF is that you make best use of the resource that you have. It's not infinite, of course, like the pricing quality team as well. So how can we make best use of the resource that we have to get the most learning out of incidents that happen, safety events that happen within the trust? And PSERF will give us the freedom to do that, to concentrate actually in the end on what's important. How do we learn? How do we improve? And the assurance will come out of that. So I think it's a great thing. But I think it's a real challenge for us as a board. We will have to think differently about safety events now. That also the root cause analysis approach really is, it might be appropriate sometimes, but it usually won't be. So we will have to think differently and embrace this. We've had meetings with the coroner because, again, I think the coronial service will have to get used to this as well. They're going to see reports up a little bit differently. But I think if we embrace the opportunity, I think it's going to fast track the improvement that we get out of safety events. I think
Anybody you speak to around this, absolutely thinks this is the right direction of travel, and it's such a better way of approaching life. Breaking old habits will be challenging, I think, because we're so used to doing things in a particular way. I think all boards will struggle with breaking some of those habits. There's some really useful pointers in here though on the policy around the board's expectations that I think might be useful to draw into some of our development work. Actually, I think there's 6 points there around board behaviour that to resonate a little bit with our earlier discussions as well, that are more generic, not just about research. I think would be helpful to work through.
Alan, thank you. Great piece of work, Judith, and I really like the PSERF framework. It just makes perfect sense, and it's definitely a great development. So obviously, I approve that. Within your papers, there was a quote that really struck me, which was, "We need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream to find out why they're falling in." So my question is, what are we doing to identify system issues, the wider scope, to prevent these things from happening in the first place? And how do we encourage bottom-up ideas and suggestions? Is there a mechanism that people can put suggestions in to stop this? And I owe Matthew and Sadge a paper on magical thinking through F&P on money, but it's the same kind of thing, really. So how do we create a bottom-up culture where people go, well, I've got an idea, because that'll stop that from happening in the first place, outside of the framework, but just on that wider scale?
Well, I think it's even within the framework, to be honest, because as you push in after action reviews and rapid responses and even swarm
huddles where execs come in to support the conversation. That's where you will generate those ideas. And even those niggling things that happen every day, that actually, if we could just sort that out, it would make life a lot easier. So I think that that gives us the opportunity to have those conversations at frontline. We've invested quite heavily in some training with an outside provider, and we've gone right the way through the whole of the hierarchy of the organisation, if you like. So we've gone right the way from ward sisters all the way up to the board, to be able to unlock some of that thinking, because you're absolutely right, Helen, it is going to take a bit of practice to be able to stop ourselves from immediately going, oh, what's the root cause? But actually, it's much broader than that. It's much more complicated. We work in a very complex environment, and there's lots of interdependencies in what we do. So going right back to the frontline staff where it's occurred can help us to do that.
But I think it's about not letting it, so how can we stop it from occurring? So you're absolutely right, and I think the framework's great for that, but how do you stop it from occurring so it doesn't get to an incident that then has a swarm team and people coming in, you know, getting people to think wider about all those things that could create an incident and trying to fix that in the system is really important.
Being more proactive.
Yeah.
So I think it links back to the improvement work.
No, so that was exactly the point I was going to make. I think we have to see these two items in tandem.
Yes.
Because if you think about the outstanding programmes, that is generating bottom-up ideas about how we can improve and get safer, more effective. And we had a presentation at ETM just on Monday, actually, around looking at not just confining ourselves to an outstanding programme that does tend to be sometimes reactive to kind of those challenges that are greatest across services or particular areas, but for a more sort of generic approach at every level. So everybody gets something by way of improvement opportunity. So I think you see the two together.
Yeah, just to build on what Judith is saying, I think I really welcome the approach which says, you know what, guys, it's clearly complicated. And I think sometimes we're in danger of, if you look through our papers, of just getting all the positive assurance without the nuance, without the complexity of the whole system. That it is to try and make improvement is really hard. Trying to sustain improvement is really hard. Because there's so many variables, right? We know some of them and some of them kind of come to light later. So I hope that PISA helps us understand that it's a complex system. We can't control everything. And it helps us better understand positive assurances we can make, but also negative assurances that there may be there as well in terms of culture or other things that we need to be mindful of. And so I'm hopeful that it's going to help us get a more nuanced, more kind of richly understood picture, rather than sometimes I fear that we're in danger of getting a potential picture, but then when you really drill into it and challenge it, you get yes, but the but is never up front. You know, you also drill to get it.
So previously it has been quite a deductive process, whereas what we need to is move away from that and look at it in the whole. You're absolutely right.
Okay. So,
Yeah, no, it was just a sort of PS, because I think that's absolutely essential, but also even when we reveal some of those things in turn will require sustainable effort and an acknowledgement of some external factors. So I'm jumping in my head to a conclusion which is inevitably going to arise, which is people's relationship with something like we do, and the extent to which people will have expectations and requests about that. Some of that will be wrapped around commerciality and around long lead times for work. Some of it will need to be adult conversations about, you know, an alert isn't always a good thing, because in reality, there's another whole literature that talks about alert fatigue and etc. So again, it's just bringing all of that nuance, as Mohammed's highlighted, into the conversation. And it is a continuous improvement cycle, because every time you think you've stuck behind the stream and you've done something for positive intent, we just know that it splashes. It just does. This is what happens when you get your back around again.
and some of this go back to culture, doesn't it, as we talked about earlier. I'm not sure I would agree that today has been all about positivity, though I would say we've heard fairly balanced reports from people, you know, in terms of what could be better, what's going well. So maybe we all view things slightly differently. But We're invited specifically to approve the plan, approve the policy, and then approve this transition to, from the 1st of December. Is everybody content with those approvals?
Yeah.
What might be helpful, I think, when things have been through one of the academies, to maybe have that endorsement in the paper, you know, just so that we know that as an academy, you've endorsed it, and then it's sort of, it gives us that just other line that we know somebody's sort of gone through the real detail of it, because we can never do that, just a board meeting. So, but thank you ever so much, and echo the thanks of colleagues. Obviously, you know, you've done a lot of hard work along with your colleague Leah, so, you know, I think hopefully pass that back. I don't know how you do acknowledgements of people's efforts from here, but somebody you can no doubt tell me afterwards if we have a formal way or an informal way of doing it. But for now, take it and pass it back. I will. All right, thanks very much. Thank you for coming. Okay, we're now back to item 12, which is our F&P report.
Okay, so you've got a couple of the 3A reports that take you through what's been 4 hours plus discussion. So take some assurance that you've got kind of the key messages. I'm just going to pull a couple out. If we look at the financial position, so this year, forecasting, if we get the strike monies covered, which we think we will, a deficit in the region of 3 to 4 million forecast for the year, which doesn't feel a big number. Lots of work to carry on to do to get us that position in there, Matthew, and maybe improve on it. But I think the thing we do need to know is the underlying financial position. And what does that mean? It means although we're sat here saying we're 3 or 4 million away from delivering this year's financial plan, we already know if we cast our eye to next year, we're £20 million away from delivering next year's plan. Now that's a significant number. It's about 3% of what we spend. So a significant amount we need to spend less. And we might say, so what? Well, the so what is it? We are going to have to make some decisions about what we do. We've discussed in the academy, really pleasing to see the work that's going kind of in our different hierarchies. So we've talked a lot about the waste reduction plan that's happening internally. You know, given the scale of that financial number, we're not going to manage that internally. But what we do know, there is a piece of work going across the Bradford Place about looking at almost programme budgeting. And what are the areas where we might save that money? So some really good discussions going on at a Bradford Place and some good discussions going across West Yorkshire. So in the academy, we've talked about all those kind of pieces of work that are going on. Now we need all of those pieces of work to contribute towards, we need to be working now to actually deliver next year. So I do think we need to know that there will be some so what's about that. We've talked lots of times, we've got lots of aspirations of the board about what we want to spend money on, and they actually right things to spend money on. I think the trick we need to be able to do now is how do we make the savings we need to make while keeping our quality and the kind of staffing things as good as we can. So I just want us to note that at the minute. So it's in red in both reports, and you know it's a small amount of narrative, but actually we're in a tricky financial position that we haven't been in for a number of years. That financial position is not just us; it's across West Yorkshire, it's across nationally, and all of us are going to have to make some of those hard decisions. But I think we need to be sighted on that as a board. And if we just look quickly at the performance stuff, so we have a detailed performance report in the academy, which is really good at saying where we are on the metrics. And we've had conversations about 500 people waiting in Bradford longer than a year. We're doing well against West Yorkshire. We're doing well against our peers and some strong performance. But, you know, we have had conversations. There are still people waiting longer than we would want them to wait. What we have had some good conversations about is the improvements that are happening. So we see the urgent care plan, we see the RTT improvement plan, and we see the cancer plan. The two we've seen in this 2-month period are urgent care and the RTT improvement plan. Pleasing to see And we've looked at beds and where we need more beds. So we've done that in stroke, so a new stroke ward. That the paper talks about opening November. I think it's going to open in December now, slight delay, but we'll change our SNAP performance ratings. And Barry, that's been close to your heart. So, you know, keep your eye on those performance metrics improving. And we've also introduced an urgent care frailty ward for young people, which is 65 to 76, which we had a debate, was that young or not, but we'll take that's young. So, you know, areas where we've kind of strengthened. So we will see that they will improve our performance metrics, but also they'll improve the quality for our patients. So, you know, some kind of overlap. So I'm not going to pull anything out from the reports. Probably the one thing I would say, pleasing to see the intermediate care review that had happened at the Bradford Place. Again, some really strong work that will impact on our winter performance. And I think a good example of where we're working on a wider footprint than just in the hospital, and, you know, where that's a really good thing to do. So I think what we do see through the academy that we wouldn't have seen a couple of years ago is that difference at Place and at West Yorkshire. And, you know, reflecting on that, we have a lot more conversations now about those different, at one time we had a lot more Bradford-centric discussions. What we're seeing now is we're seeing work happening at Place and work happening at West Yorkshire. They're all contributing towards our financial metrics and our performance metrics. So pleasing to see that. That's all I want to pull out. The rest is there for you to have a look at.
Thank you very much. Anything you want to add from a finance performance? I'm pointing you because I'm assuming your finance, your performance. It's not today.
Well, just to add to what Julie said really, and I'll probably bring a bit more of internal focus than Julie's Place system arrangements. So, you know, we are under heightened scrutiny. We do know our projections create a problem moving to next year. So what are we doing about it? So internally, we have introduced an additional layer of financial governance, where in addition to the executive CSU meetings, we've got individual finance performance reports for escalated CSUs, and they're facilitated by the Deputy Director of Ops and their triumvirate supporting the service area team. But in line with the accountability framework, that's much more about supporting process, a critical friend to try and help them source opportunities. Recognising we're going into winter, maybe difficult to extract those over the next few months, but let's get ourselves in the best position going into next year. And the outputs of those meetings will come through to waste reduction group, through the normal escalation process with improved action focused real. That's what we'll be concentrating on. The waste reduction group has a number of task and finish groups, work streams and areas of focus that are looking at areas where we are support costs over and above our core capacity, which Saz chairs the elective recovery group, looking at hotspots of overspend, for example, junior doctor rostering, but also areas of good practice. So we do know that urgent emergency care are undertaking walkarounds with their triumvirate, multidisciplinary team walkarounds, that we've asked them to come along and share how's that working, what's working well, can we share that best practice? In addition to that, particularly with the external scrutiny, is what additional financial controls are we almost expecting to put in place? We've got a number of complementary arrangements now in place, looking at non-clinical agency, looking at reconciliation of how our whole-time equivalents have moved in the last few years, and looking at further controls around specific areas of cost there that be non-paid discretionary spend. Areas we didn't really want to tread into, but you know we are there, and there's almost an expectation that we will do that. But just to conclude, I'm putting a positive spin on this, not like me. When you think about the challenge we've got, £3 to £4 million, it's still a big number. But that actually means we're 99.3% of 570 million. And a lot of work in terms to get us to this point. I've had a few emails coming through that I haven't read yet, but it's around the process to get us over the line of this rapid response piece of work that might get us to break even. But I'll update you on that as we go through the next process, next 24 hours.
Yeah, so I've sort of written, we'll get there like skin of his teeth this year.
Yeah.
But actually, the effort you're talking about is about the underlying deficit and really getting, cranking up that up. It sounds as though that's happening. I guess we should formally note that, I think, as a board.
Yeah,
Into-
we're acutely aware of the operational pressures that
Yeah.
we face in organisation, and start mentioning something like
Yeah.
100 in the department first thing this morning. That's,
Yeah.
you know, the resource that goes into
Yeah.
that's.
The only thing I'd like to add, Helen, is the fact that we've held our delivering operational excellence workshop with all of the CSUs and with exec colleagues contributing to that in terms of looking at quality, patient safety experience and performance as a whole. So we're pulling together the outputs from that workshop, and that will form the improvement plan for the next 18 to 24 months. And in due course, we will be bringing that back to the FME committee, whether that be November or January. I just need to tighten up on that, but that's a piece of work that we're already engaged on and almost completed.
So are there any further questions? Julie, Matthew, or Saj? No, just one little one for me. Have we done all right out of the ERS sort of experiments that West Yorkshire's been involved in?
Yeah.
After the further 2% adjustment, we are currently projecting around about a 1.3, 1.4 million pound gain on the back of it.
But presumably colleagues are aware that West Yorkshire sort of put itself out there to do a slightly different thing around elective recovery than the rest of the country did. And at the moment, certainly through Wyatt, it was reported that that seems to have played in our benefit.
Yeah.
And I'm just making sure that the organisation it has done.
And interesting link back to the discussion around clinical coding. If we don't get this model through for a continual period of time beyond this year, we will be at risk on a PBR perspective because of the depth of our coding. We will not attract the right and appropriate level of income for the coding would be at an appropriate level.
Okay, thank you. So we note those two reports plus just note the remedial action that's going in terms of that underlying deficit position. We've then got EPRR as a subset of this finance performance section, and I think that feels Sam.
Thank you very much, Helen, for that. I will have to go into a little bit of detail on this one. Unfortunately, it's a necessary bit of detail given the requirements that are placed upon me as the accountable emergency officer, and to ensure that we don't miss something off, because there is you'll see from this bundle of paperwork, there's quite a significant focus now on ensuring the board is cited and that we're able to sign off the plan. So this is one that I have to bring to board, or a delegated committee of board. So the Civil Contingencies Act, the NHS Act, the Health and Care Act underpin EPRR within health. And as part of our NHS standard contract, we are required to ensure that we comply with the EPRR framework. NHS organisations are required annually to submit their level of preparedness with EPRR core standards. And what that would usually mean is that we undertake a self-assessment and submit the position to board. And the board previously would delegate that to FMP, and we would then submit our compliance levels through. So for the last year, we submitted a substantial compliance position. In June of this year, NHS England, North East and Yorkshire confirmed that we're going to go down a revised process for 2023-2024. Which was that as part of that self-assessment, we also now need to include evidence which is then externally scrutinised to confirm or not whether they believe you are at substantial compliance or full compliance or partial compliance or non-compliance. This is something that was trialled out in the Midlands last year, and then it's been rolled out into two of the regions, ourselves included, over the course of this year, with a full adoption over the course of next year. So you can actually see this as an opportunity to rebase where organisations feel they are and the evidence would suggest they are at. the Midlands experience highlighted that 66% of organisations actually dropped down the levels of where they thought they were in terms of and where they were actually being. And that's quite a key thing to know. And actually that's highlighted both in Appendix 1 and in Appendix 2 that we've provided in terms of the rationale as to why this is being done, and things like Grenfell, the Manchester Arena bombing, and also a letter from Anthony Keeley which describes to boards that don't be surprised if you find that the rating drops down. Our ability, I would say, to respond to an EPRR type incident is the same as it was previously, despite the fact that this report I'm about to tell you that we've gone to non-compliance. But what this highlights for us is an opportunity to get all of our paperwork and all of our evidence collated and submitted. In line with the deadline of the 29th of September, the Trust completed its initial assessment against the 62 core standards. And as part of that, Steve Amos and Jenny Byron, who have very much led this on our behalf, have uploaded over 300 documents on the central system and the portal. We submitted our position and that was challenged, as was every other organisation. So the final position that we've got back is that the Trust is fully compliant on 20 of the 62 standards, and 42 are amber partially compliant. And it's pleasing to note that we have got 0 as red non-compliant. But that compliance rate then means that we're at a 32% performance, and a 32% performance means that we're overall non-compliant. Only your full compliant standards count towards your percentage compliance. So if you have a number of partially compliant ones, as we do, you can't get partially compliant. You have to get to a certain percentage with full compliance. So that's an important point to raise. So we will be reporting a non-compliant position based on that assessment. And what I'm required to do following approval from yourselves is I need to submit the template that's included within Appendix 6 to our LHRP to highlight that we are non-compliant. And as part of that, what I also need to do is to work with Steve Amos and colleagues to develop an action plan to highlight the work that's going to be undertaken in order to detail the specific elements of work that bring us back to substantial or full compliance. So because of the timelines that are going to be falling into play here, we will need delegated board approvals for this, which I'll specifically come on to at the end. Over the 12 months, just to look back at some of the other activity that we've undertaken, we've had lots of opportunity to test our command and control and business continuity plans. So the industrial action, although has been very disruptive from one perspective, has been really good in terms of us setting up our command and control and taking learning from it. So that's been a really good opportunity for us to test. We did have a severe snow disruption back in March 2023, so we were able to test our command and control infrastructure. And then, in fact, Judith mentioned the electrical outages that we experienced. For all of those incidents, what we do take is a debrief and a learning exercise as well. So we've undertaken those. We shared the learning. We are going to be committing to an internal audit of our emergency planning, but that internal audit needed to be delayed in order so that we could get our submission done and the results back. So that will be commencing in December. So hopefully we'll be bringing that back in due course. in terms of EPRR resource, which is one where the board needs to assure itself that we've got sufficient resource to deal with the EPRR requirements. Over the last 12 months, we've increased the team by 100%. So we added another full-time equivalent individual to that team. So we've got Steve Amos and Jenny Byron now in the team. What we will need to do, and this is a piece of work that I'm going to do with the team, is to understand what the full requirement is, given the heavy burden we've now got in terms of some of the paperwork and evidence collation that we need to do. And that in due course will go back to through the rounds of business case review group and the planning committee, and subsequently again for consideration. So in specific, what I'm asking the board to note is number one, the significant work that's been undertaken over the last 12 months in order to highlight our level of compliance. Note our compliance against the 62 core standard and the non-compliant position based on 20 out of the 62 standards being compliant and 42 being partially compliant. Provide me with the authority to sign off by the 20th of November the Appendix 6, which highlights our position. And if the Trust Board could provide us with delegated authority to submit by the 31st of December the action plan that we required, because of course we won't have a board in December. There is a slight typo here, because what it does say is we'll do that through Finance and Performance Committee in December, but we don't have a Finance and Performance Committee. So my ask actually is whether you will delegate the authority for us to do this by email through Finance and Performance Committee. So they're the 4 specific recommendations. Like I said, lots of appendices there. The full data set with 300 individual articles of evidence, which I felt best not to include in the report, but it's available to review if anybody did want that.
And am I right in thinking that as West Yorkshire COOs, you've also had a debate about this? Because at Wyatt, that we were at, everybody was reporting this situation, if you like. So we're not a one-off. We're not out of kilter with everybody else. This new method has resulted in this same position, and you're sharing your learning across the West Yorkshire COOs in order to help everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And at 32%, we are either the best or one of the best. It does go down to about 4%, depending on which organisation you look at. We shared back our learning as well with the NHSE regional team as well. So we have written to the team yesterday.
Yeah, good. I think it's important to know that, so that we see it in that context, I think. So any specific questions of Saj?
Just quick one, please. Thanks, Saj. That was very thorough and very helpful. Just in terms of business continuity, I was looking at the examples that are in there, and I take the point entirely that you've taken the silver lining from all the industrial action, because it's got to stress test our business continuity. I wonder whether we've done anything in terms of EPR kind of loss and recovery. That's from a kind of digital perspective. That's always a really challenging thing to do.
Yeah.
Do we have some of that scheduled? Do we have a normal plan?
Yeah, so we've got a full business continuity plan about EPRR and EPR recovery rather. There's too many EPRRs in that one. And that was subject to an internal audit last year, wasn't it, Paul? So we do tests as well. So what the paper describes is this time round we did an exercise on loss of power child reduction, fire evacuation. Previous year we did a test on a downtime. So we basically simulated as go dark basically.
Haven't chatted for him about the volume of what we created. Well, we still have the recourse so that the APR doesn't work. We can get back to 10 and think, but I didn't say that. That's not.
Yeah, big go.
Just a really simple question about who sees this in the trust? So what level of staff see this? And whether or not they understand the rebaselining of numbers, and that it's not necessarily a deterioration in what the trust is doing. How does that happen?
So in terms of the physical compliance rate, the 62 core standards, I don't think people out there would know, or what people out there would know about is whether they've got the relevant training in terms of being able to chair a command and control, the required. So all of my colleagues sat around this table who are execs on the first on call or second on call rota have got some training needs analysis undertaken, are completing the PHC command and control training. So people are aware of it, but wouldn't necessarily be aware of the actual percentage.
Just on that, it's a really good point. When we discussed it at ETM, Steve came, and we thank Steve for all his work. It's been incredibly labour intensive, but also at the same time very demoralising for somebody who's dedicated a lot of time and effort to get us over the years to a standard that was pretty strong. With the stroke of a pen, that's all now goalposts have changed. And we wanted him to know that we knew that, and it wasn't a reflection on him.
Okay, good point, thank you. So we're invited to, there's 4 recommendations here. The final one being amended, that the approval will be provided via the Finance Performance Academy. I've had my wrist slapped several times calling it a printer. Forgive me. By email, not at a meeting. Is everybody content with those recommendations? Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. And there's an awful lot of work sits behind this, and I know we all roll our eyes at these things, but it is important. And you know, and like I said, pass the thanks back to Steve.
I think as well the way it's presented is really simple. So we've talked a lot about reporting today, but actually the summary is really easily read and understood. So
Thank you.
Okay, so we now move on to the report from the chairs of the QPSA. And again, I think we've probably covered some of this material that's in here, but if you want to highlight things that you think you need to know as a board, that would be helpful. Are you taking it down?
Yeah, shall I kick off and then perhaps Louise can jump in if that's okay, Louise?
Yeah.
The way we've done this at QPSA, that Louise and I co-chair, and the way we co-chair is we take a block, normally in a calendar quarter of meetings. So you've got a block of meetings that one of us chairs, and then the co-chair who's not chairing normally writes the report.
Okay.
It's a kind of sharing of the burden and the challenge of managing QPSA. So in terms of the 2 reports, you've got one from September, one from November. I'll quickly rush through both. Like you said, Chair, we've covered some of the issues already, so I won't labour them. But from September, I think it's interesting that we'd already identified and picked up some issues that have subsequently come to light through the channels around SI timeframes. So, for example, I think we'd identified that 10 of the 15 SIs in that period had kind of exceeded the timeframes. We know that's not the most important thing. We know the most important thing is the learning and the outcomes. And we also know we're transitioning to PSERF, and therefore, in a sense, that 60-day target becomes moot. One of the things we talked about this morning that Sarah raised as well in her update was around inequalities. So one of the things that we've picked up a number of times is communication difficulty in its broadest sense. So language, other forms of kind of communication challenges, and we see SIs or incidents where this can be a theme and a trend. And this kind of goes back to the point I think Sarah was raising this morning. So I definitely think there's something here wider for the board, for all of us to think about in terms of really understanding that that's a key factor for potential harm to patients, and recognising that and seeking to address that. We've touched on the shimmy and depth of coding, but we did raise this, I think discussed it all the way back in September and perhaps even earlier in QPSA, and you can see it in the report that we discussed this. If I can highlight, complete excellence in one regard, I thought that the way we discussed the shimmy, where we then had a report and a presentation, was it Mike McCoo, I think, who came to talk to, no, it was the other gentleman, Nick Rushton, yeah. It was absolutely excellent. So, we've talked a lot about challenge, we talked a lot about assurance, and I thought that in the academy, the way we addressed our understanding of the shimmy issue and the depth coding, and then created hypotheses and then tested those hypotheses in the academy was excellent. I really, really thought that was very, very good. And there's something really important for us to learn from that. And I thought we had a really good conversation about that. And you can see that coming through. And in that instance, we talked earlier about, in our pre-meeting, about challenge from NED to NED and exec to exec. And I've seen that in academy in this regard. And I think that shows me that we are good at this and we can do this. So that was really helpful. If I then perhaps jump to the November meeting, as you know, we extended the November meeting to have an extended session on the neonatal SIs, including looking at the rapid quality review. We've taken a considerable amount of additional assurance from that. I would say there's something here about you can keep asking a question in terms of assurance. How much assurance is enough? I think it's something that I've heard back from their colleagues. And there has to be a recognition from a personal basis as to you can keep asking for things and then you reach a point of disharmony or potential risk of disharmony, and that's not good for anyone. But what the important thing is that are we getting the assurance that we need? I believe we've got as much assurance as we're going to achieve. And then there's a recognition about pivoting to learning and improvement and looking forward, looking wider. And I think that's where we've got to. I did find that session really helpful. And I think Sam, who presented to us, was really generous with his time and his expertise. And it was very, very welcome indeed. We did then, following from the previous month, have some discussion on shimmy and depth of coding again. And I think for me, this shows that we are picking up things and then we're following them through. And I think that's a really positive thing. And I think we should be proud of that. It's led to some challenges, but I think it's important that we are picking things up and tracking them through. So that was helpful. We had a session around unexpected children deaths in October. It's going to go through the normal process. We had a discussion around how they should be reported and what the trigger point should be. Again, I thought that was a really helpful discussion. And then we went through some of the stuff you've already seen at the board in terms of PISA, the improvement strategy, and then we did the routine kind of look at high-level risks. You've probably seen the outcomes of that. I don't probably need to elaborate any further on that. And maybe I throw it to you, Louise, if there's anything you want to add, if you think I've missed anything or you want to elaborate on anything.
Yeah, thank you, Mohammed. No, I don't think you've missed anything. I just wanted to say something about it echoes what Karen referred to about, you know, how crammed the agenda can be and how you don't always manage to get in everything or do justice to it. And I just wanted to say it was an unusual meeting the last time. We had extra time for the discussion of the neonatal deaths, and it was brilliant actually to have colleagues there, although I'm not sure they perhaps experienced it quite as positively as we did, but it was, you know, their depth of experience bringing that to the committee. You shouldn't be needing to have that every time, but I did value it very much. However, we did really significantly overrun on that meeting because of the amount of other really important things that we could do. And Judith's left now, but towards the end, we were trying to find ways to get through the agenda, and we were in danger, I think. And you know, and Laura rightly pulled me up on a couple of things around. So we were listening, perhaps rushing through a little bit through the PISA response plan, and then we had a presentation about the 15 steps program where we'd invited a colleague, and I, as chair, felt that, you know, I hadn't been able to do justice to some of that. And so I suppose I'll just say I really welcome what Karen has suggested earlier about a task and finish group and some particular focus on the maternity and neonatal work, because I think we are understandably so focused on this area that we're missing other really important work and not doing justice to it. I don't know, Mohammed, if you wanted to just come back on, or indeed anybody who attended the academy, I'd welcome your input on that.
I mean, just as a quick response, Louise, if you don't mind. I think we're at one on this. I completely agree with you. I think maternity neonates is incredibly important. It then naturally is like a massive gravitational object. It pulls all our energy into it. Unfortunately, the consequence of that can be that we miss other things, or we don't give other things the important and relevant time that they should have. And so I think we do need to think a little bit about how we manage kind of the competing demands. We only have finite time. We keep extending it, but we do. I think we are reaching the limits of what we can reasonably be expected to do in an academy.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Right, thank you.
Just really
Yeah.
building on the point that Louise said, I thought there was something actually really positive came out of that. So we did indeed get towards the end of the meeting and we were over time, and I think DSERP was near the end of the agenda. And I think it would have been tempting to say, well, can we just take it as read and just sign it off? And I think Judy, to her credit, felt that she could say, I don't think that's appropriate. I think this is too. This is going to be a real challenge getting in the space of PSERP. And I think we need to do proper justice to this, and if we accepted that, and we did actually have a proper good conversation about it. I think it would have been easy to just skip over that time, but it's great that Judy felt she could in that space say, no, that's not right, we need to talk about this properly. She did, and then we did have that conversation.
Again, another important sort of measure of culture that people can do that, and that they're able to do that. You know, things do run over time. It says looking at a watch, it happens, and there's a lot of content in there, I think. So we had our earlier recommendation, didn't we, about establishing this task and finish group, looking particularly at data and around maternity. It'll come back to QPSA at some point, and whether you set up your own subgroup to do some more detail on that, I guess it's up to the QPSA. I don't know if that's something you do. You know, I think maybe one, like, get it into some reasonable shape so that it's got some, you know, it knows what the teams know what they're doing, and then you've got that continuity and consistency as an academy to be able to then take it forward, because you won't lose it forever. You're only losing it for a little while until it does that piece of work, I think. But I think it's a really good point about the breadth. You know, it's massive breadth, isn't it? And I don't understand all the subsections that go on under QPSA, and that may be something you consider. Okay, thank you very much. Is there any other questions in terms of those two reports? So we're asked to note them, as we are with all of the academy reports. And then the last item in this bundle, because we've done the other two, is the research activity. And I think is that over to you?
Yeah, thank you. So this is the regular report. This report goes initially to Salton Patient Safety Academy and then subsequently comes to board on a quarterly basis. It's produced by Tracy Watson, who's Director of Operations Research, and also Professor John Wright, who's our Director of Research. It's a good read. It's quite a lengthy document. I'm not going to go through it in any detail at all. I'll pull out just a couple of things if you can, Chair. I think it describes very well the activity that's going on within Bradford Institute for Health Research, the IHR. It talks about the large number of participants we have into research, the large number of studies, the 487 active studies taking place at the moment, and the really positive feedback that we get from research participants, which makes them want to keep coming back and open us next time. I think within this document, there's quite a focus this time on the work of the Improvement Academy and of applied health research, which is particularly important because probably that's what makes the most immediate and direct difference to our patients and our communities. So I think that's really positive. And it talks about the large number of grants which is supporting that £7.5 million worth of grants, supporting that work around patient safety. It highlights some of the work in there, so decluttering safety, the I Manage My Meds programme. There's also information here about the national impact. So we know that the IHR has a national and international profile, and there's highlighted in here some work around the COVID, so the redeployment of nursing staff in particular that happened during COVID. What can learn from that if you have to do it again, and how can you manage that change? So we're influencing national policy as well. And the final bit I wanted to pull out was around sort of phase two, if you like, of Bowling Bradford. So I think the reputation of the IHR was largely built on Bowling Bradford. I'm sure everyone's quite familiar with that. The second birth cohort we have now is Bowling Bradford Better Start. So we've now recruited 5,000 pregnancies, which was a target to look at what early life intervention will actually make a difference to ultimate outcomes throughout childhood and into adulthood of our local population. So that's all I actually wanted to pull out, but if I can, I'll just finish with a challenge to myself and a question I support for the rest of the colleagues, and that is this report on research goes to the QPSA, it comes to the board regularly. I'm conscious that it says on the agenda for assurance, it feels a bit more like for information. It is a good read, but is that actually what we want at the board? So I suppose my question is, happy to take any questions, of course, about the content of the paper, but also, is this what we want as the board? Do we want it in a different format? Do we want something different, or is just doing what we want to as a board?
Okay, thank you. I guess you say that, I'm assuming that you think we should.
Not necessarily.
Have you got any ideas?
I'm very happy to bring this. I think it's
Yep.
interesting.
Yep.
It's informative and it's exciting. I think it talks about, it's really positive, I think, and it's great to hear positive stuff. But, given the time constraints of a board meeting, we can still bring information, but I suppose to what extent as a board do we want to hear the detail of this, and how often?
Okay, thank you. So has anybody got any comments on that particular question?
Yeah, I mean, I've got some thoughts on this. Thank you, Ray. When I first joined this board, we didn't have any research information coming to the board. And I think collectively as a board, it's something we requested. Research is such a big part of our organisation. It's very important that we have a line of sight of it. So from where we were to where we are, big improvement. Is it exactly what we need or what's required at board level? I'm not sure as well. I think you and I have had a conversation a number of times before about, what can we learn from other trusts, NHS trusts with big research arms, things like the Christie or Marsden or elsewhere. And I know they're specifically cancer, but they may do other things with it, kind of the approach that we could learn from those big trusts. And we've talked about having some kind of research dashboard, and we talked about what might be the right metrics that may be helpful for a board to understand. So for me, I think it's very important that the board has a line of sight to some important metrics around research, values research, and is seen to value research by the researchers within its organisation. There is a gap, I think, which is that the two things almost happen in parallel, right? So we do the delivery of care to our patients, and then we do this huge research thing over the Wolfson and the Bowling Bradford and everything else. And sometimes there's not that interconnection. And we've talked about how do we have more of that translational, kind of, what is the value or the benefit directly to patient care, and how can we do more research that's translational? And of these things, this is not new. I would be really keen to explore more on that. We've got the Improvement Academy, which does some great stuff. But again, we don't have the visibility of it here. And the Improvement Academy, I think in particular, probably bridges some of that gap between more of the kind of abstract research, really valuable, but has a long lead time. So whereas we're delivering care today, tomorrow, next week, next month, how is that benefiting our patients? And so I think there's something there that we could try and make more visible to the board. What the reporting frequency is, monthly, quarterly, monthly seems for research seems to way too frequent. Whether it's quarterly or 6 monthly, I have no real strong feeling about. But having a regular cadence of research here and having much more insight as to how we're doing, how do we compare with others, and that translation element is really positive there. One of the things we did talk about, I can't remember which call it was now, a couple of weeks ago perhaps, was around could we have more visibility of the smaller research that we're doing at ward level, posters, presentations, quality improvement projects, outstanding, maternity pharmacy, theatres, having more of that, more visible to members of the board, members of the academies. I think that would be a really powerful story to tell. And I think we're doing it. It's it's kind of, it's where we were with this report 4 or 5 years ago. It's not visible at this level, and I think we need to value it and support it a lot more. I think there's a real value here.
Okay. Louise?
Thank you. Yes, so just thinking about what you said, Ray, I think that's really interesting what we would need to know, what we need to know as a board. And I suppose it's, you know, being from a research background myself, I recognise the kind of the thing and the new, it's not a newsletter, but all the report, the things that our researchers are excellent at kind of saying how important and valuable, incredibly whatever their stuff is, because that's how you continue to generate funding for research. And you know, and that's a part of the business. It's an important part of the business internally and externally from Bradford. And there's prestige and there's motivation and value for staff being involved in research. And I think that we need to know some of that as well. How is that through perhaps the People Academy, Karen? I don't know whether you get any feedback on that, on the kind of, you know, that sort of value. It's very difficult to put a metric on that, but what that is. I suppose and I'm sure this is known somewhere because I have raised this question before. There's financial benefit, or there should be a financial benefit to the trust from being involved in research. You know, is that optimized? Are we clear what that is? Because there's also a cost to doing research in certain areas. And I think what Mohammed, you were saying about the translational research, it would be good to see how we do this. I don't quite know, but the impact of the research that's done in Bradford in relation to our strategic priorities. I think that would be really helpful actually in terms of a sort of a dashboard, because there's so much stuff. Back to the present lots of things and then you try and kind of distill some, you know, insight from it. I think if we took that look at it in some ways, I think that'd be really, really very interesting. But that's my view.
Thank you. Thanks, Louise. Karen?
Just a real quick, I agree with both Mohammed and Louise. We fund it. It is part of us. We should hear about it. And I'm just going to take us back to earlier this year, actually, because the people doing the research into stroke came and presented, and now we can see that manifest itself in stroke awards. And so there is a read across into strategy as well. I think it's really important we do hear about it, value it. I'm sort of okay you deciding how it happens, and the bits that you could bring to life for us align to where, you know, the topic of the hot topics of conversation. But I do think it's really important we hear about it.
Yeah, just to pick up on a few of the comments if I can. So the research dashboard is delayed, but it's coming. I had hoped it would be with us by now, but that will be coming very shortly, and it will talk about some of the metrics that you've asked for, Mohammed, and I have picked that up following that conversation about some of that smaller research and about the posters and about presentations and things like that that the team are doing. So yes, happy to pick that up. In terms of the translation element, well, there's a couple of things there. Of course, we've got the Improvement Academy, and I think a lot of the work at the Improvement Academy, and again, Ahmed, I think we've picked this up before. I spoke to Mike Cook, who's the director of the Improvement Academy. He's very happy to come and talk about some of the specifics, which are really having an impact on our not just on our hospital, but our communities and the work they've done out there in the community. So I think that would be interesting to hear, and I'm very happy to ask Mike along. He's always delighted when he talks about these passions. And the other thing is as well as the Improvement Academy, is what used to be called Patient Safety Translational Research Centre. The T bit has been dropped, so the translational word has been dropped from the title, so it's the PSRC now. It still does the same thing, and that's very much focused on actually the research that makes a real difference to people in our hospital and in their homes as well. So Rebecca Lawton, who's the director of the PSRC, have been reported to the board, I think it's probably a couple of years ago now. But again, like all researchers, Rebecca will be delighted to come and talk to us about what she does as well. So if the board were happy to welcome those two groups along, I'll get them along to come and do a little bit of a presentation about what they're doing to increase your visibility. But I just wanted to check, I suppose, that there's a lot of information in it. is it how you want it to be? Is it doing the job that we want it to as a board, or as it says in the agenda for the assurance, rather than just for it's a good story to tell?
So just, I guess, just picking up on his comment, it's interesting, isn't it? It's an interesting thing that comes. But I think it's important to pick up that impact and opportunity, both on our strategy, our improvement work. You know, how does it feed some of our improvement thinking, and also what benefits we get as an organisation? Because if I go back to my past in Bradford, we often used to say, here we've got this fabulous thing, we do know with it. It's all busy all over the country, but it's doing note in Bradford. Now, that seems to have changed and it seems to have shifted. And so I guess from a board perspective, I think we work through what comes where and when. But I guess we're getting a little bit of a call here for maybe in some of our other papers, we need to draw some of that research in and actually start to see it driving some of our other decisions that may be helpful. But it's for you to consider, I guess, as you take this forward.
So just thinking that there's a large number of research and innovation assets within the district, and there is a piece of work called Research as One, that tries to tie all those things together. Because we also have the benefit of being HDRC in the district, you know, City of Research, all of those things. I think it would be good to, if we're in the business of at least getting intelligence and insights into what's happening, that we understand our contribution to that bigger piece at place level as well, perhaps for the next report.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you for that. So assurance information, great report, really interesting, and I guess we note it and welcome it. So thank you. Okay, so I think we're now into we've got a partnerships dashboard next.
Thanks, Jo. I'll be very quick.
Thank you.
Apologies, because if anybody else is confused by 3 separate dates on this report, then I'd take comfort from that, because I certainly am. So it says 31st of July, 31st of May, and it says 30th of September. I'm not quite sure why, but look at the circle in the top right hand corner, because that and just to kind of consider this is more of an art than a science in terms of the determination of red, green, amber, etc. These are kind of long lag times for building up relationships and partnerships. And I think just a general reflection, hopefully endorsed and validated by things you've heard throughout the meeting, of the role that we are playing in our place as a partner in Actors One, and as certainly my report references work at ICB level and West Yorkshire Association of Acute Trusts. I think the reducing inequalities remains amber. And that's in part because I'm not sure that we'll ever really be finished in this particular area. There will always be opportunity, and we always want there to be opportunity that we're pursuing. And it acknowledges the point that Mohammed was made about, could we be more sort of focused? Could we talk about it more as a board? I just want to, because we didn't talk about the Equality Diversity Council, we haven't had one, but at the last board meeting, we heard an awful lot about the work that we're doing in trying to tackle inequalities through our conscious approach to the waiting list and prioritisation of our elected backlog of patients. Something, Helen, you will be familiar with very much so from Calderdale and Huddersfield. And there's some guiding sort of evidence bases which we've been utilising and drawing upon to inform that approach. It was really encouraging to hear Carl talk about the progress that we've made and the next step, which is very much connected with the access work stream through Actors One, and going out and talking to GPs and saying, you know, why are referral practices different in your area? Why are you not availing yourself of the Cancer 2-week referral pathways, etc.? Some of those things that we've highlighted as potentially disadvantaging some of our population. Just on the 8th of November, there's a new publication. SADG is already in discussions about how we can learn from it. It's a series of case studies. It's called Tackling Health Inequalities and NHS Waiting Lists. King's Fund. So just to be aware that that too is work in progress. And the rest is just for information.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you clarified these dates anyway.
Yeah.
And I think you make a very, that the whole inequalities and access, most people who are experiencing inequality never get onto the waiting list.
Yeah.
They never get to that point.
Yeah.
And I think that's a challenge. I think particularly, it's a challenge for everybody. It's a particular challenge, I think, for Bradford. So any questions or points of clarification now on the partnership dashboard as presented? No, everybody will be getting a bit, you're all getting a bit tired now, I would imagine. But, and I think there's a little message in here in terms of our energy at this point in the meeting, isn't it? And we have to try and keep it up there if we possibly can. Okay, well, if there's no questions, we will. We're not challenging it today, then we're just reviewing it and noting it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So if we move on to audit and assurance, so we've got a report that came out a little bit late. Have I missed something? You looked at me then like I've missed. No, I haven't missed out. The report came out, Chair of Charitable Funds, I think, and we've that item to take. So I think that's you, Julie, is it?
It is.
This occasion?
Yeah. I'll be quick in doing that. Just a couple of things to pull out. One of the big appeals that's work in progress with the Charitable Funds Committee is a neonatal appeal about having a unit for families who are using neonatal services, and what great timing for it, given the kind of focus being on our neonatal services. So, if we can get to that place, we've already got some funding towards it. Great timing for that appeal. Just another thing to pull out, the aspiration of the Charitable Funds team and the committee is to have a 25% rate of return. I struggle with that 25% rate of return. I had a chat with Matthew about it earlier on. So it's about for every pound we spend, making £4 in things. We're not there yet. And I think what we had a discussion about in the committee is we need some big appeals to kind of make those targets, and we need to build the team to make those targets. So support for that, but more work underway, but a recognition to kind of get to that place. We need some big appeals and we need a bigger team, but work in progress. The rest of the report is for information. You've got a set of terms of reference. So last approved by the board on the 11th of May. They're minor changes, and the changes are captured on the front sheet of the paper. I'm not going to go through them. So there's a couple that are purely about how things have moved around by who looks after the Charitable Funds team, and some are suggestions, recommendations from our auditors. So all set out in the paper, but those terms of reference are here for approval.
Okay, so like to note the report, but specifically to approve the terms of reference. Yeah, everybody content to do that? Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions on charitable funds? Nope. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Julie. We now move on to the board assurance framework and high level risks. Again, you'd hope at this point in a meeting that everything on there will have found its way through our discussions, which is always a good test of whether we've got it right. So I think I hand over to you at this point, Laura.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. So I'll try and be as brief as I can in introducing this. I'll go through the board assurance framework first and then pause, and then we can look at the operational risks. So in terms of the board assurance framework, this is reviewed every 2 months by the lead directors. And then it's reported through the executive team, and the academies also review the risks that are within their remit. So this time there haven't been any changes to the risk scores on the back, but the information in there has been updated as appropriate. So there's nothing in particular to pull out from there. There's one thing to pull out from the discussion that was held at the executive team. There was a question raised there as to whether we need to add a new risk to the BAF in the light of recent events, and whether we should reflect a risk relating to being well led in the overall governance of the organisation. So just asking the board to consider whether they would want to add that as a risk. And then secondly, at the academies, so both the people and finance and performance academies, a question was raised around recent adverse publicity and whether that could potentially have an impact on staff recruitment. So, and that would need to be reflected under risk 3.1, which relates to our vacancies and recruitment. So that will be considered, I think, with the interim director of HR when we next review the so I'll pause there to see if there's anything else on that.
Okay.
And obviously the suggestion around the new well-led risk.
Yep, so I take it it's ETM's advice that we should include that as a risk. And I guess we should take that advice. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think, yeah, just to point out that doesn't sort of neatly align with one objective.
No.
It would be like a cross-cutting
Yeah.
risk, which would align to all of the objectives.
Yeah. Didn't find the right obstacle.
Yeah. Find a way of representing.
Little bit of that. I think it's really important that we talked about the mitigating actions we're going to take. And hopefully, it's not a big red risk. And hopefully it's something we can manage once we get going with some of the development there. And I guess it relates in part to the thing you just mentioned about, whether or not there is a follow-on risk in terms of recruitment. And I guess there's a risk. Maybe we're going to need to see whether or not that doesn't materialise. Okay, yeah, thank you. Any questions, any points of clarification on it? Any of the other points? There's a lot of appendices going.
Yeah. Do you want me to just quickly talk through the operational?
Yeah.
risk?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so just quickly, there's one risk there which was beyond the date for completion of the mitigating actions at 3800 around increasing the cost of gas and power. But that risk is now actually being closed down, and we looked at that ETM earlier this week. So I think that's been reflected in budgets and sort of the contracts have been agreed. So that risk is now being closed down, and that will be reflected in the next report to the board. In terms of new risks, so there were 4 new risks added, so 3 in September, 1 in October. I won't talk through those because they're in the paper. But just to note that one of the risks, 3598, around children and young people being admitted to adult wards in mental health crisis, having a variation in their care. The score from that one, I think, when it was first added in September was a 16, but has since been reduced to a 12. And the reasons are there in the paper. And also risk 3767 around the lone worker devices. I think that was one that had previously been on the risk register but had reduced in score, but then it was reviewed and the score was increased. But I think again, once that was reviewed, that score will probably come down again, because we've already talked about the fact that those devices are now in place for the maternity staff. And then there's just one other risk which had a reduction in score relating to staffing shortages in the children's community team. And that was because the team was able to take on new packages of care, but noting there were still some vacancies, but it was felt that the score could be reduced. And there were 3 risks beyond the review date, but all of those risks have since been reviewed and are up to date. That was it.
Okay, and by way of mitigations for the new risks, they're included on that big table with all the little writing on it. Yeah, I can't see it now because I've got my wrong glasses on, but I just saw it when I was sort of going through the papers. I just wanted to make sure I've got that connection right. So, does this raise any questions for anybody? Mohammed, then Barry.
Yeah, just one question for me, please. This is really helpful as always, and I really do like, I think I've said it before, the changes to target mitigation, kind of appendix 4, just so we can track when things are changed. I thought that's really incredibly helpful. I've just got something that I can't quite reconcile, which is risk 3877, because in the cover page it kind of talks of the original date was reviewed. It was 31st of August 2023. And then in the narrative, it talks about it being extended to 31st December 2023, but then the change to time mitigation, it's got two different dates, which don't quite make sense to me.
Yeah, so they've spent the papers talking about the review dates, when the risk actually reviewed, that's the mitigation dates, it's two separate documents.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Thank you. Barry?
Appendix 4 shows the rescheduling of mitigation target dates. Just a question as to whether it's acceptable for target dates to be deferred so many times. I remember sat in this room, it must be 3 years ago. I pointed to risk 3468, incorrect use of EPR. That's been rescheduled 9 times. You look at on the risk register, you look at the potential manifestation of this risk. Incorrect information being passed to patients, incorrect information being used to make decisions about patient care, patients attending unnecessary appointments. I know it's been a busy 3 years, COVID's got in the way, all those sorts of things, but particularly when we're highlighting such key potential risks, is it acceptable to just produce this and tolerate that level, that frequency of deferral? Do we need to have a new approach that says we won't let things slip that far?
Or question what it is we're doing about them, given that they've had to slip so often. So, which of you was first? Either Karen or Mel? You can fight over it.
Actually, I think it's a really fair challenge. Yeah. And I think we should look at where that happens. And indeed, we do have those conversations and those challenges actually at UTM when we do that. And the one that you're talking about in terms of EPR, you would think that you would be able to address those things. But then there are other things. So I could tell you, I've been on so many boards over so many years. I don't think I've ever been on a board where workforce shortages has not been a feature for over 10 years, probably. So in those instances, it's a perennial problem that by virtue of giving some hope that you will have some targeted mitigations that you want to apply, you have to put an end point to it. But then when you've done that, the goalposts have somehow shifted and that still is a big risk to the organisation. So you strengthen, change, do something else, or repeat the cycle again in terms of the mitigation. So I think there are two types of risks, and one's quite legitimate, I think, and we need to challenge ourselves as to whether or not we're getting the challenge right in those areas where actually you should aim for a conclusion to these risks.
Make it a similar point, right?
Similar with a little add-on.
Okay.
So I think it's good that we track this, because we didn't track this until recently, actually, and we wouldn't want to be accused of just passing over risks and rolling dates on. What I find really helpful in those risks like staffing that Mel described is repeating the risk assessments. So what we often find is that when a risk was on the risk register, there's a mandated field that says do the risk assessment. So that might have been fine in 1996 or whenever it was that risk went on. But actually, if you're looking at the point that you extend a mitigation date or an endpoint date, I think it would be good practice to, at that point, redo the overarching risk assessment and upload a risk assessment. That's what I do. And I'm just wondering if it's something that we could bring into more routine practice, because I don't think we're explicit on that.
So perhaps when you meet as ETM, I guess you could have, so there's something about tolerance and there's something about management of risk as opposed to mitigation of risk. Some risks will never be mitigated, and maybe be able to draw the distinction between, you know, we wish we didn't have to tolerate this, but this is the best we're ever going to get to, which is sort of like with your point, and how do we therefore manage that? So maybe drawing that distinction, because it does look a bit like, oh, and we don't know about it then, doesn't it? Which is clearly not the point. You know, what's really happening here is actually it's sort of almost plateaued and it's never going to get to that. It's never going to get below that. Do we continually review what we're doing to try and do that? Yes, it sounds like we do. Sounds like that's done quite robustly through ETM. So perhaps we just need a little bit more sophistication in the way it's presented so that we don't feel that it's just the deadline's been moved. If that's something you could maybe take forward as ETM. Ma'am, because good point.
Yeah, just on that, actually, I think just taking Barry's comment and building on that really. So the thing about misuse of EPR, it's always going to be a risk, right? You know, we have an EPR, someone can always misuse it. The thing therefore is to say that it's always going to be a risk, but what's our target kind of reduction in that risk? Or what's the tolerable level that we're prepared to tolerate? And what's that target? One of the the discussions we had earlier around depth of coding could be an example of a manifestation of an inappropriate use of EPR, and then it flows through everything else, and that becomes a problem. I think what doesn't come through here, and probably exists elsewhere, is when you're showing us the mitigation dates, what is the target mitigation risk score reduction, right? And what are the and so being a little bit more clear at our level, I'm sure this exists in the paperwork itself. So we can see that. So you can see what steps are we taking. So if I see that the current score is 15 and we move the mitigation date, well, what's the target you're prepared to tolerate, right? Is it 10? Is it 12? Some things will always stay.
Yeah.
I couldn't immediately see that.
Yeah, it's on this one. It's on the big form with the little writing.
We could add in
You could add it on there actually, because I'm looking at this and then you're trying to bring it from the document, aren't you, into there, because that would be helpful.
Okay. So
Yeah, just on that one, I think what Karen suggested is really key because there's been work happening in this risk. The mitigation dates have been moved, but I think Karen's hit the nail on the head. We haven't done the reassessment of the risk to say, therefore, is it still at 15 or is it now at 12? So it's still showing progress, but we're not there with this as yet. And I wonder whether the action from this is perhaps between Paul, myself, and colleagues, we look at doing a risk assessment on that. It's exactly what Karen said.
Yeah. Okay, so that's in terms of where we're at as a board, I think we're probably content. We recognise what's recorded, what's presented here. It resonates with us. We've approved the new list on the back around the trust and being well led. But we're also making a request, I guess, back to ETM for that slightly nuanced view of the review process and how that then gets presented back. That's for you, no doubt. Okay. So we've just got a few items here that some of these I'm going to just ask if we can move fairly rapidly through them, if that's okay, given the time that we're in. I think we've done justice to a lot of items on the agenda. I'm not saying we don't do justice to these, but if we could perhaps just move through them fairly quickly. And I think the first one is our annual update on comms, and that's Saj.
Yeah, so this is one of those areas that I'm caretaking for a short while until we get appointment of new director posts in. The presentations there just literally does highlight how busy our comms team have been, the work that they've been undertaking. It highlights for you the areas that we're finding both on the intranet and on the website that are being most viewed and looked at. And in terms of bringing to your attention the positive coverage we've had through initiatives like the BBC Look North coverage of the NHS 75 anniversary. We mentioned yesterday at the AGM, and it was highlighted the Yorkshire Midwives on Call, which was nominated for numerous national awards. And of course, we had Baggins the Bear being shared as well. And a real sort of tangible benefit from that was a charity partner saw that on Look North, contacted the charity, and that resulted in a substantial donation as well. Yeah. So there's some real benefits as a result of the work that's happening there. And I think the other bit for me, which is not to ignore, is the fact of the other digital channels like social media platforms that the trust has, but as exec directors and colleagues we have, I know Mel's got a big following on X, Karen's got quite a big following on X and Twitter as well. So lots of engagement opportunities there as well. And the comms team have worked really closely with the great work that, and Karen's already highlighted, Kat and team within the OD structures have undertaken. So things like the Thrive conferences, the Filipino celebration event, and really getting those out. And in fact, I've had people coming to me and saying, there's loads that are happening on at Bradford. And when you look at where they pick that up on, it's been through things like X as well. So it's about making sure that our profile is there. The other thing the report does is just highlight some of the other campaigns that have been focused on over the course of the next 12 months or so. But it was just literally a look back on the activity that's been undertaken.
Okay, thank you very much. So any questions?
Just a comment, if you don't mind,
of course.
Helen. I've accused Bradford of being very shy, communication wise. Previously, it's great to see the YouTube channel coming into its own and people being able to look at Bradford in a in different ways. I think we need to acknowledge the big volume in numbers, so FOIs, media inquiries, etc. Some will be positive, some won't be, and it'll depend on that timeline as to when some of those volumes came through. I think I would just really like to acknowledge the 5th on the list for website hits on vacancies. Yeah. So we've talked about whether or not our reputational damage has impacted our ability to recruit, but actually seeing that 5th on the list and it never featured in the top 10 for those vacancy pages and the click through to track, which is the recruitment process, is fantastic. So just want to say well done to him.
Well done. Thank you. But no, it makes good reading, doesn't it? In terms of Bradford's always got to work harder than everybody else at getting its sort of positive press coverage and the like. And there's obviously a lot of effort goes into that. So thank you. So I think we're just delighted to note that, as far as I'm aware, and thank the communications team for the efforts that they've put in. Okay, so the next item is membership plan. And I think this is for you, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you. So this is just for information, and there's just a couple of bits I wanted to pick out from the report to highlight. So there are 2 areas that we're focusing on in terms of our membership, because there's sort of 2 key groups who are currently underrepresented in our membership. So that is people from the Keighley constituency and members who are aged between 16 and 22. So we have started to do some work around this, and working particularly with our widening participation team, and we also took part in the Generation Medics event to try and encourage more younger members. We've also asked our governors to support us with finding more younger members. We've had a very modest increase of 13 new younger members so far, but we will continue with that. In terms of Keighley, we still haven't had any new members from that constituency, but we will be going out to election for a member from Keighley, so we will be picking up sort of the work that we do as part of that and engaging further. And I think we'll be seeking support from our current governor, who is from that constituency, to help with that. And continuing with that. So I think that's all I wanted to pick out. Like I say, here for information, but haven't taken it.
So I did have a conversation with Laura outside of the meeting around sort of maybe sitting this a little bit more on the council governors agenda, in terms of that being a pretty core business for governors, in terms of, and not to not be supported by people, colleagues within the organisation, but so this is sort of a main job for the governors, and how could we do that a little bit so that we sit some of that responsibility, I suppose, with the government, which is important. So, any questions on the plan? And people content, I take this into the governors as something that I think they need to focus on. Okay, thank you very much. So we note that, thank you. The next item, I haven't really anything to say. Apparently there's usually a sort of list of champion roles and you all know what your champion's in. I have no idea what the champion's in. But I also know there's been no annual appraisal of non-executive directors within the sort of required deadline. So I think what's important and just what I want to mention under here is that rather than review this at this point, let's get the annual appraisal for non-exec scheduled in, hopefully for January. Now, it's going to have to be a bit self-appraisal because clearly I won't have seen you on earlier. But I would like to get them conducted and completed. So at least we can start then a new cycle of non-exec appraisals. And within that, can we pick up the champions and the roles and all of those things? And it's an opportunity for people, particularly with some going and some new people coming, that we maybe reassign some of those roles. So that's okay with people. That's my proposition of how we take that forward. Yeah, I'm looking at non-execs in particular. Yeah. All right, thank you. And then back to Laura for the work plan.
Yeah, so this is the work plan for 2024 to 25 to approve. I mean, it's here now. I'm sure there will be changes to this as we reflect and, you know, go through our effectiveness work. Obviously, this is based on what we've had previously, so it doesn't kind of reduce the items in any way. But yeah, so it's here for approving today. I think noting that it will be a bit of a moving feast, and we'll bring it back to each meeting.
Yeah. And in particular, we talked in the break, didn't we, that quality diversity inclusion is already scheduled for our January meeting, referencing our earlier discussion. So actually being able to take that sort of bigger strategic view. So we need to think about maybe how we do that in January, but it's already on the planner at least, which is good. So any comments on the board work plan? Notwithstanding, it may change a little bit once we've done some of our development work. Okay. Then we are into any other business. No. Okay. And any issues that we're referring to board committees or academies elsewhere that we haven't picked up during the course of our discussions. I'm not going to rehash every item in those. Anything else that you think we've missed that we hadn't discussed under? No. Okay, thank you. So apart from the fact it's running over terribly, are there any reflections or comments on the meeting itself? Have we done justice to the agenda that we've been set? Have we been kind to our presenters? Have we been fair in our challenge? John?
Yeah, just a couple of comments, please. I think it was helpful that we talked at the beginning about how we should work together. I think we have reflected some of that in the meeting. So I think, you know, that is a start. You can only move from where you are. I am a little bit concerned. I think that one or two of the people who come to board at the moment are extremely, shall we say, don't know what word to use. I'll use sceptical and suspicious of us, given past experience. And so I think not only we've got to build up some trust between ourselves, we've got to find a way of getting the trust of those staff back as well. And that probably is going to be an even bigger job.
Yeah. That's a very important point, and I think it's something we probably need to reflect on in terms of we develop our sort of, you know, behaviours and effectiveness going forward. Thank you for making that point. Any other further reflections?
Don't know whether we should think about having the board assurance framework further up the agenda, perhaps at the start. I mean, there's pros and cons, isn't there? Because it was helpful having it at the end because you could think about whether there'd been any debate or discussion all the way through the day that we need to then factor in. But I just think from the point of view of the length of day, and it's an important piece of business there. I don't know whether we should think about having it further near the start.
I think it's one of those difficult ones, isn't it? If you put it at the start, you then say, oh, we should have had this at the end because we've ended up covering half the things in the item. If you put it at the end, you've run out of energy a little bit and you don't feel you're doing it justice. There probably isn't a good way. It's sort of, maybe we'll put it in the middle. We could try it this way. There's nothing to be lost. So the next meeting is on the 18th of January. That will be in person. the focus of, we said, the main sort of strategic focus is EDI. So we're now moving to our 12th session. Do we have a little break at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah, do we normally do